On to our next presenter, and I guess we've kind of touched on excise there for a second, and I'm just looking to see if he's wandering up the front. We are going to talk about the Clean Car program, particularly the Clean Car Standard, I believe, mostly, but also the discounts. Now, Phil Haynes, who's wandering up now, is a fairly well-known consultant in the automotive trade. He's previously been with some OEMs, and now he's out on his own offering his services to many, maybe some more. So I'd like to welcome Phil Haynes to the stage.
We've got a
There's your
clicker there.
clicker.
Cool. I best set a timer because those of you that do know me usually mean somebody has to stop me. So we'll use technology for that. There we go. I'll set that at 20 minutes. Normally, maybe we'd say a little bit of Tenakoto. Maybe we'd say a little bit of Konnichiwa for those of you in the room who've just come back from Japan. But maybe actually in 2023 we should be saying Ni Hao, because the Chinese have arrived, haven't they? Right. This normally takes about 2 hours. So there's a lot of detail you're not going to get in it. But I've tried to put quite a lot of detail, but do it in pictures, because that says 1,000 words. I'm ASBE, so I'm a little bit different to most of you in the room. So a graph to me is a picture. So I apologize that when I say pictures, half of them are graphs, half of them are pictures. So you're going to have to roll with that a little bit. It's all about greening, and it's all about decarbonising. So I'm going to cover, first of all, where it all started. So the Clean Car policy started with this sort of graph. Vehicles emit a certain amount of emissions, carbon, and the idea is that they'll emit less on average. Yet to play out whether the average emissions coming in equals less emissions as a total, because we're all doing more kilometres, we're consuming more cars, etc. So will it actually mean that? Two things to take out this slide. There's commercials, there's the average, and then there's passenger, and they've all got to go down. That's the idea. That was the number that they wanted to get to in 2025, which was the average 105 in old money, because that's in NEDC. We now work in WLTP 3, which is 117. Don't get hung up on that. I'll just take you on the journey as to what it sort of means. The other bit to take out of this is everything. Half of the room here I see are used, involved in used imports, involved in used businesses, independents. Half the room involved in new vehicles. This is everything. This is new and used. Nobody escapes this journey. Nobody. Everybody has to conform eventually. You will be assimilated. The other bit of information which everybody forgot and nobody sort of remembered was that this part of the graph is commercial vehicles. Somehow on this journey, the total New Zealand fleet of 4 million light vehicles will have 10% less commercials in it. Yet to see how Clean Car Standard is going to have any effect on that. So I would read in that, and I'm a skeptic, I read and overthink everything. I would say there's other stuff going to happen. Otherwise that ain't going to happen. So watch this space on commercials, because that requires 300,000 less utes or vans in this country. And unless we're suddenly going to scrap them and change them to RAV4 hybrids, I'm not quite sure how that's going to happen. Anyway, I'm going to take you on a bit of a journey. We're going to spend about 5 minutes on clean car discounts, some of it just to make sure all the rest, the whole room knows a certain amount of basic knowledge. So, it's fees and rebates. This is the rebates. You've got a neutral zone, and anything cleaner up to 0 as an amount of money. This is in 10-gram bands, just so that it fits on the page, otherwise you wouldn't be able to see any of the numbers. About $50 or $60 per gram increments. So each of those 10 bands is either about 500 odd or about 600, but 500 or 560, depending on what it is. Then you've got at the top, it jumps to 8.6 for an EV. That's a new one. The right-hand column here is the used version of that. So first thing to understand about it, you're all in it, but there's a different amount of money for a new to a used. You probably all knew that already. Don't worry about the why, because it's already in. So you don't, actually, the why on this is irrelevant. Don't get confused about it. Let me explain a couple of things first, though, because this is WLTP3. Most of the country has been used to seeing a load of figures that are related to NEDC or ADR. That's that number there. There's a different number for petrol to diesel. It's starting to get a bit complicated already, isn't it? But just so that you're going to have to learn that. You need to learn that language within 2 months. Second bit of it is you're supposed to do something on your showrooms and in your yards, and it's this. If it's getting a rebate, basically it'll get a green badge. If it isn't getting a rebate, basically it gets a blue sticker. Right. On top of that, there's obviously RUC and a few other things happening on EVs. Right, that's rebates. Fees. Neutral zone now is up here. Rebates are up there, and it goes down like this, same sort of thing. We've got 10-gram increments, so you can see how the dollars go down. Used stops at 2875, and this is used imports, not used that already exist in that car park out there already, used imports. New goes down to 5175. Again, you've got to get your head around what these mean in old money, if you want to call it that. So the neutral zone still has the blue label, and then you get into a red label, so anything in the yard. Now, at the moment, pretty much anything in the yard with the red label is hard to sell. Anything with the green label is easy to sell. It's just a question of how much it is and if you've got one. That's the whole lot put together. Learn that. And we'll start to talk about now what it actually means. So all the headlines on this was about electric vehicles. So it launched with 862534 on the used one. PHEV is a bit less. And then if you actually want to pick a number, an equivalent 120 grams or so, which is where we want to go, where we're going to end up, is about 24 new and 980 used. The things you need to remember from a transactional point of view is the vehicle has to be under $80,000. You probably all knew that. Hopefully you did. That might move as things go on, but at the moment they like the idea that it's causing launches of new vehicles under 80 grand, so they'll keep it for a bit. Rebates, customer claims, you don't really have much to do with that, but you want something on the VOSA just to say nothing to do with the sale. Fees, if you want to register a vehicle, you've got to pay the fee. So you kind of do get involved in that. There is another aspect, business sale. This is a income, a capital income, and a capital expense. So it affects depreciation, and it will affect FBT. Just so that you've got a snapshot, this is a snapshot of the inland revenue page. If you want to understand the taxation of it, go to the inland revenue page and you'll find this information. Bit different for lease, so just remember that if you're involved in lease, buying, selling. And then there's the fee version as well. And you'll see the FBT version, depreciation and FBT are different for that. They go down because of the rebate, and they go up because of the fee. If you want to understand that, go to the IRD website. Gone. That was your chance. Cool. Right. Let's try to relate it to 2020. So this is 2020's sales in New Zealand. New and used, because this is new and used imports. All wrapped up together, this is where they fit in that banding. A bit hard to read, so here's the picture. What it means is the volume is spread in a profile like that. And the dollars relates like this. You've got a claim, an income, a rebate to somebody, and then you've got fees and penalties up here. So as the volume gets into, if you get more volume in the higher emissions, you get more fees. If you get more volume this way into the lower emissions, you get more rebates. Everybody up to that? You should all be up to about a good understanding now of how the clean car discount works. So now, let's just relate it to what actually happens in the marketplace. So firstly, a couple of the vehicle examples, and then secondly, we're going to talk about how that money actually stacks up. First thing, as we see in 2022, most of those BEVs, basically 70% is Tesla and Hyundai, and some MG ZS's, a few luxury cars. Used, it's 85% Leaf. So it's pretty much small passenger at the moment. In this clean but not zero, so low emission vehicles, you've got loads of Outlanders, you've got loads of Aquas or Priuses, and you've got loads of i3s, Ioniqs, Jazzers, hybrids and things like that. And then as you go up to the middle band, actually they're just a bigger hybrid, really, in that sort of area. So 120 grams to 140 grams is small SUVs, hatchbacks, still things like that. Then we've got neutral. Neutral zone is basically populated by a load of medium-sized cars and a load of SUVs. As it gets heavier, you've got cars that are a bit higher performance, perhaps the business is used to 2 litres, 2.4 litres, all those kind of things. You know, the stuff that this country has been consuming for years and years and years in volume. That will go down. And then you've got a chunk at the top there that are all commercial diesels, which the government thinks is going to reduce by 300,000 between now and 2025. Not sure how. If you're in a particular camp in the room of used and new, used average is 161 grams. Passenger version of that, which is 90%, 1% of the volume, is 156 grams. New is 194 grams average. Nothing to do with whether one is cleaner than the other. All about mix. It's all about people actually don't buy many used import utes. They're all new. It's all about mix. It's not one's dirtier or other. It's all about mix and what we buy. That's the only bit of consumer demand in this. Right, picture then. So coming back to that profile, this is what it means in money. So that's exactly the same as that, and this is what it looks like this is what it looked like on 2020 numbers. So when they were planning this and putting this in place, 2020 looked like it would be like that. So loads of cash being created by all the dirty cars, and a bit of money being created to have to pay back. And you can kind of look at it and go, okay, if we sell twice as many clean cars and half as many as that might balance it out. You know, I might be doing somebody a bit of an injustice there, and that might have taken them 2 years to actually have that conversation with themselves and work it out and do a lot of maths. But fundamentally, somebody went in and went, some of this will equal some of that, and the money should just pay for it and be a cost neutral, and then wrote it into some legislation. But if you just go back and say 2020 sales, then that is what it would produce. Remember that bit? If we now go and wrap that into 2022, so this is actuals for the year-to-date 2022 since clean car discount opened up. So it's actually only 6 months worth of information, which is why it looks such low volume. But it gives you the profile. So what you've got is $107 million worth in the pot and $200 million taken out of the pot. If you go back to the budget of last year, there was $300 million put aside to loan from the revenue for this program. So at the moment, they've used up 100 million of their 300 million. They've got a bit to go. So they don't actually have to change anything on this if they don't want to. The politics will tell them if they do, because the pressure on taking all that money from a ute owner and giving it to a Tesla owner might actually politically not last till the election. So that's what that looks like. But that's 6 months. So what we're going to have a quick look at now is, bearing in mind we've got what it looked like in 20, got it looked like in 20. These are actuals. These are facts. This is not. I'm going to just forecast what 22 looks like. So this is wrapping it out to the end of December. We're going to go from about 14,600 EVs, BEVs, sorry, to about 21,000. That might be lower if somebody can perhaps delay the December arrivals so that they go into the next year, maybe, but roughly. And so we're going to need to add back in some ice volume, because at the moment, since April, there's hardly been any ice volume, because it's kind of got a bit distorted. And we're going to have to add back in a bit of hybrid to a normal rate, because there was a lot of hybrid pent-up demand that went out in April. So that's what it'll be. Something like that. And I think that still ends up with a bit of a deficit. So even though there'll be a chunk more pay into it, there'll be a chunk more pay out of it, because we're now on a bit of a momentum roll on EVs. $100 million, though. In fact, if you're being pedantic, the last one was 101 million, and now it's 99 million. So you could politically go out and say, oh, it's getting less, the problem's getting less. We'll see. In a minute, I'll take that through to what I think 2023 looks like, but I want you to just get your head around, that's a forecast. Might be a bit less, might be a bit more, it's a forecast. But it is based on some knowledge of pipeline orders, etc. So, what will it look like by the time we actually get to the full 23? Subtle difference. 2023, I think, might actually balance the books. Partly because I think we will be limited on the amount of EVs that can come into the country. So that bar drops a little bit. And there'll be a few more hybrids in here. And that's partly because if you want to buy something out of Japan at the moment, the price is very high. So the used industry, I think, will get something back and be able to wade back into that a little bit come the new year. So I think that will. I might be 50 million wrong. I don't think it's going to be 100 million difference like it is today. So the government could just sit there and go, this actually is going to come right. Let's just stick with it. I think they will stick with it. They might get a bit titchy about Tesla bad press. They might get a bit titchy about the Ute farmers as it comes to the election. But roughly speaking, if nothing else happens, I reckon that's where we're going to end up at the end of 23. A rough balancing of it. In September 2023, though, there will be an election. It might well be that the first thing that they want to affect is that area there and go, I love the farmers, I'm going to give them some relief. So there's a little bit to play for, but it gives you an idea of where it's at. Right, that's clean car discount. Now, that's used up a few of my time, but what I wanted to get to was a baseline of you understanding it, because I'm going to use that to illustrate the clean car standard in a minute, because it's quite different. Right, clean car standard. So if we look at this 22 figure, not the 23 for now, because that was a forecast. If we look at 23, which I'm pretty happy about as a number, what's going to happen with clean car standard is that some added money or pressure or mechanism is going to come in on the importers, because the clean car standard is importers. So if they import something clean, they'll get a credit of grams. If they import something dirty, they'll get a debit of grams. Sooner or later, they have to pay the penalties. At some point, they're hoping to get some money back for the credited grams. So importers will have an amount of grams that are sat there going, oh, you might get some money for them. And then there'll be a little bit less dollars for all the PHEVs, because it's a little bit less in terms of its target gain. You know, because the average target's going to be 145 grams. The average average EV is going to be about 600 kilograms of tare weight, and all these targets relate to kilograms of tare. Now I've confused you, haven't I? We'll come back onto that in a minute. But then you've got this. Coming on top of clean car discount, which is consumers, you've got all these bars, dobs of money, dobs of pressure coming on the importers. Consumers know nothing about this until actually something happens with either product availability and price. This is importers. By my reckoning, by the end of if we applied this to the 2022 number, of which 3/4 of it's already happened, so if we applied it to 22, there'd be $225 million worth of money, worth of grams. Actually, the money's irrelevant, it's just grams. Sat in a pot somewhere, on an asset list maybe valued at some amount of dollars. And then there'll be amount of money, 122 million, on all the dirty ones that came in, and I keep using this dirty, but it's a good phrase, sat in there, and sooner or later they've got to pay that. Some people are going to pay that as they import it. Some people are going to wait a year and assess it and say, oh, I've got a liability over here. Some people actually will be allowed to defer that for a year and not have to pay it until 2024. Roughly speaking, though, the idea is that between those, they have a positive pressure towards importing clean vehicles. So whether that gram is worth anything, and whenever you eventually pay that penalty, there's $100 million worth of push towards importing a green vehicle. That's an importer incentive. Actually, the pressure and incentive on the whole marketplace is therefore the 326 that the customers are getting rebates on, and the 100 million odd that's left over netted off between those. So there's actually a $429 million push towards cleaner vehicles. Again, this is all based on the 2022 number, of which there's only 2 months to go, so they're pretty accurate numbers. The actual pressure on whether somebody might buy a cleaner vehicle or not, or stop buying a dirtier vehicle, actually is only that, really, because I've already accounted for that in there. Actually, the pressure is 237. So there's almost double the pressure to go clean, and there's half the pressure to actually not buy or carry on buying a dirty car. If you don't want to listen to the rest of it and you're bored, just take away this one single thing then. That has to go somewhere. That may or may not all be real. It might not have to go anywhere, but the fact that 300 million of it is in a customer's hands and they can see it has just affected your whole demand. I think 23 will look something like that. There'll be 250 million as a thingy. There'll be about a million grams of credit sat in new vehicles, and there'll be about 3 million grams of credit set in used vehicles. That's a bit of an issue because new and used importers can't trade with each other. So how is the used industry going to realize cash on 3 million grams of, when actually that means there isn't going to be anybody there to buy them for now. Back to this number and how it works. So that's the total direction, and what they wrapped into that then was a set of targets in the standard. So if you hear stuff on the standard and people start talking about targets, that's what this is. So out of that direction, they came up with numbers, and the numbers are split passenger and commercial, not new and used, passenger and commercial. It's the whole market. So already that adds a certain amount of issue with it. Then we swap from NEDC to WLTP. So instead of having one box that said 105, I've now got a table of 8 columns and 4 deep just to get to the 117, which is the equivalent of the 105. It's getting fucking complicated, isn't it? Are you keeping up, Jace? What that means is that in 2023, we've got to go twice as quick in the reduction of carbon than 2021. In 24, it's 2.5 times as much of a reduction as we've been used to. In 2025, it's 3 times the reduction that we're used to. And in 2027, it's 6 times. So we have to accelerate this curve, and these are the targets that take us there. Oh, getting complicated. The targets are based on how heavy your vehicle is. So a lighter vehicle gets a different target to a heavier vehicle. The idea is that every vehicle gets a task. So if you're Toyota and you've got the Yaris hybrid, which is essentially the cleanest ICE car in the country, if you want to get cleaner, you've got to work out how to make your Yaris, the cleanest in the market, cleaner. The good news is they set the target such that that gets through anyway. But some might. Here's an example. That's a 1,200 kilogram car. It gets a 125 gram target. Even though the country's target is 145 grams, it has to achieve 125 grams. By 2025, that's 92.3. Spookily, the actual number is 96 today. So the Yaris have got to do a bit of tweaking by the time they get to that. But by that time, 4 grams deficit is bugger all. So actually, they don't really need to do anything. SUV, medium one. I picked the CX-5 because that's kind of the last 5 years with the volume, and the RAV4 because that's the current level of volume in the new vehicle market, and will be the used one as soon as they come on stream. 2023, its target is 167 grams. The national number is 145. Because it's heavier, it gets a higher target. It's got an allowance for pushing all that weight around in grams, and that's how the standard relates this total journey to a table of targets down to actual vehicles that people bring in. Gets a bit stiff by then, but if you're a RAV4 hybrid at 122 grams already, you'll still be earning a credit in 2025. The average ute van, this is where it starts to get, and this is where National will give you a lot of pain and start to try to needle into labour with this proposition, is that the average ute van is 2,100 kilos. It's got a different target structure. Its target is 221 versus the National 145. So he's allowed a lot more, but it's still not quite enough because half the utes will get a penalty. By then, though, it's got to get to 158 grams, and trust me, to get to 158 grams with a ute or a van, it is going to have a big battery in it of some description. It's either a hybrid, very, very good one, or it's a PHEV, or it's an EV. You cannot get a vehicle fit for purpose to do 158 grams and tow around a whole ton of stuff in the back of it, and a trailer, etc., etc. And maybe put a flatbed on it. So yeah, that's how it works. Penalties then. Here's another complication that I don't want to get hung up on, but just so that you know. The new vehicle industry has a higher penalty than the used vehicle industry. The theory is one's got half its life already spent somewhere else, so it's half as much carbon, and all the other, frankly, bullshit reasons for coming up with a different number. But anyway, that's where we're at. That then grows. So we've got $45 for a penalty gram. You might be able to get $45 if you trade it with somebody else. And by the time we get 25, 67. So it's kind of going up another 50%. So the idea is not only does the target get stiffer and lower and you have to get cleaner and cleaner and cleaner, if you don't, the penalties get more and more expensive. You're supposed to be able to offset it. You can bank all these credits, but you can also defer some of the penalties for a little while. If you are an averaging importer, brand, independent dealer, whatever you might be. Some, though, will have to pay as you go. Because of that and the different cash flow implications, they're going to get charged less. So now we've got a different target. We've got a different target by passenger and commercial. We've got a different set of numbers and values and dollars by new and used. And then we've got a different by new and used if you pay now or pay later. That's why it takes 2 hours to go through this. Right, back to this, because the picture is probably helping get it. How will it stack up then? So if I pile this money back down onto it, and I think about 2023, so now I'm looking at that 23 forecast I did, and pile it back on again, what will it result? Hopefully you've got a little bit of idea of how volatile it is. You'll notice in the middle, you've got some greens and some reds. So this clean car standard doesn't match the neutral zone that you've got that's clearly defined in the clean car discount. In the clean car standard, there's some that are going to get money. Some customers are going to get, here's $2,000 to go and buy a Suzuki Swift. And by 2025, Suzuki's going to say, $700, please. So there's a little bit of argy-bargy going on. Net, I think the importers will be up for credit in 2023, and I think if based on that sort of mix there and the clean car discount bit, I suspect it's about 80-odd million. Either way, it's a chunk of money pushing people to be greener and pushing brands to import and pushing all you used car importers to import more Aquas and as much hybrids as you can and one Leaf for every 10 ICE vehicles. And there's still that 250 million pressure on, do I really want one? Should I buy something? Should I go cleaner? Should I buy a Highlander hybrid? Or should I go and carry on buying that diesel Touareg? Who knows? It'll depend. So that's that. That kind of sits like that. Do you get it so far? It overlays over the top. It doesn't match. And there's a whole chunk of combined money that now acts on the marketplace, some of it on importers, some of it on customers. And there's a whole lot of pressure on the marketplace to not buy dirty, but actually most of it is going to be on the consumers and the price. Got it? So that's what it looked like in 2023. The fact that it's on average a net credit grams, and the fact that used imports will also be net credit grams, actually means in 2023 you're probably not going to see that much difference in pricing. You're going to see all the different importers just try to balance the mix in the background. Unless it's really, really extreme, and they might play with some pricing. I very much doubt that the Rangers pricing today was put in place without thinking about 2023. I very much doubt that the Isuzu Utes price today hasn't already factored in somewhere. In used, you don't need to think that far ahead. You need what you bring in December and get here and arrives in January, February, March. You'll play that as you need to on your yard with your mix of stuff that you managed to get out the auction. Right, consequences. Examples. So this is how some used cars play out, a Haynes and a Leaf. I've taken them just because they're two extremes. And how the Ranger and the New and the Leaf and the Tesla might play out. So they'll have a target penalty. This is 2023. Their target penalty or credit versus their own target is that number there. And it, in theory, equates to a certain amount of money, either a plus as a fee they've got to pay or a negative that they could at some point get some money back for those grams. What will they do then? Actually, the choices in the marketplace for 2023 are you pass it on, you bank or offset it later, you offset it against something else because you're playing with it, or you find somebody to buy your grams, or you find somebody to sell to, whichever, buy, sell, or market. What's actually probably going to happen then is that guy there who brought in that high ace, and he's only got $342, is probably going to pass it on. He's going to find a way of making it work in his yard. If the landed cost goes down because people stop buying high aces in the Japanese auctions and the price goes down, he probably doesn't need to offset it. He's just price stays the same. That's the vagaries of used imports. Nobody in the world has tried to do this on used imports before. We are the testers. Leaf, you're probably going to offset some of that against something on the yard, unless you're an EV specialist, in which case you've got loads of Leafs and loads of grams and you're going to try and find somebody to sell them to, or you're probably just going to offset them and wait and see what happens. Because until the election's done, nobody's going to want to buy your grams. Are they? Because they might not actually mean anything after an election. So people are going to bank. There won't be many pay-as-you-go. If the price goes up because everybody wants to get leaves, though, then is that really real? Because if the price in Japan's gone up $1,000, by the time it gets here, $1,500 landed, half of that's gone. So you might actually have to find something, and you might actually have to find somebody to trade a few grams with to try to keep your price point. New is pretty similar. I'd say he'd swallow that, because he's already competitive. Doesn't need to do anything. If he's not competitive, he might want to pass it on. I think he'd swallow that. Leaf, again, same for new as used. If you've got loads of grams, how can you try and realise them? So if you're desperate, you'll offset them this year. If not, you'll just bank them and wait. Depends whether you've got to try and keep it competitive. If you're Nissan and you need to sell another 1,000 leaves, you might need to change the price. You might wait for an Avia. Tesla, though, here's where it's really, really, really different. Tesla has got loads and loads of fucking grams. They can't offset, and they don't really want to pass it on and give away the money. They can't offset because they've got no ice. They've just got loads and loads of grams. Who knows what it's worth to them? Because they've got to find somebody to buy them. And the buy them will be about when, as well as how much. you know, the 50 cents in a dollar type of conversation. Right. Actually, in 2024, it's pretty similar. It's just that as you go forward, maybe you stop banking and maybe you've got to sell them or offset them. But actually, it's pretty similar. You know, 600. By then, I'd have said price might have gone down a bit. So we're not going to see it through until middle of 24, actually how this is going to play out. 25, flick through to that, just bigger numbers, less numbers if it's an EV because the target went up, so the allowance went down. But if it's an ICE vehicle, then the numbers go up again. And again, if you're Tesla, maybe 2025 is your payday. Maybe you can sell these grams and get them back again. Maybe you can. Right, that's it for the marketplace. Are you following me? Right. What effect is it going to have? In terms of dealers, ICE has just got shit. That's it. It's got volatile, it's got sticky, whatever words you want to use if you want to be politically correct. If I'm presenting this on a Sunday and not swearing, then you just need to provoke some change. Use good examples. Finance, 0% deposit. If you go and have a look at Peugeot for the Ion, fantastic product. Go and have a look at Jaguars. Go and have a look at Toyota. You'll be able to get 0% deposit, or $0 deposit, sorry. So actually, this amount of cash might just become a cashback and a way of offsetting it in finance. So there's intelligent things you can do. So if you are involved in the retail trade, these are the kind of levers that during 23 you're going to have to play and still use, even though you don't quite know what's happening with all the prices yet. There's a tax implication, so get your head around that. Residuals, I think this was a question that sort of came up a little bit earlier on as well. Yes, this will have an effect. Absolutely, because it's all about purchase. It's all about input. It's all about imported vehicles. People can opt out of buying, which is exactly what they're doing today. The reason the market is tight is not because we've got a load of crap stock. It's because they're opting out of buying. They're waiting to see. So that'll have an effect. And there'll be certain products where you can still look and think, oh, actually, that might be worth more. That might be worth a lot more. A double cab ute in 2025 might be worth a hell of a lot more if it's coming off Oryx's lease, etc. So it might well be something. Somebody asked the question earlier on about revenues and so forth. I work with a performance dealer group, and their average is 22% higher residuals in 2022 versus 2021. Took out their electric vehicles. I think somebody else asked that question, the electric vehicles. If you take out the electric vehicles, it's still 6% higher. So prices on everything have gone up. But that's what it is. Does that mean your interest is higher? Profitability of a dealership? Of course it does. Somewhere between 20 and 20%. Even if it's pipeline sales, you're going to be consuming more money. Should you be making more money? Of course you should. You're not dealing with an average $50,000 new car. You're dealing with an average $65,000 new car. You're not dealing with a $15,000 average used import. You're dealing with a $20,000 used import. If you just take the 10% margin that most people try to start with, you need more money. Appraisals. Pipeline. Absolutely played havoc. That 22 units a month used, I've appraised it, I've done this deal, they sold it on Trade Me. Lost it. That's half of them. Just that one thing. Any questions on that? I'm rattling through now. Market effect, and this will actually, most of you are going to ask questions on this. Yes, some vehicles will stop being imported. You cannot get a VW Polo today. It stopped last year. You can't get a Holden Spark, a Holden... Oh, no, that's a different problem. China. Ni hao. Oh, yes. Tesla in the room? Don't think so. Anybody who thinks they're American, think again. Price pressures on ICE, yes. Residuals will be affected. I actually don't think there'll be much price pressure on EVs until 2025, until the second and next generations arrive. That's when this country will decide what the residual price of a used EV is, because at the moment it's used imports that's deciding the used price of an EV. And that's the point at which we'll see whether it's any pressure, and that's the point at which we'll see whether all these new importers coming into the market from China actually have affected the marketplace. Japan, not many there. Maybe there's going to be a chunk of them available in the UK, because for the last 2 years, they've been dirt cheap and they've been subsidised. Difficult to get stuff out of the UK, though. Boom. That's it. I think that'll do, won't it? Then with questions and answers. And the only question I'd raise is, are we remembering consumers in all this? So will it be successful? What do they think? Fantastic. Right, I'll have a glass of drink of water.
Yeah, thank you, Phil, for that. Does anyone have any questions for Phil? Quickly before we go on. If not, you can grab them in the next session, which of course is morning tea, but anyone got anything? No? Fantastic. Now, there was a lot of detail on that. As we said, we will be sending out these presentations, so we'll click through.
Oh, no, don't need to do them. That's my backup in case I get asked a tricky question. Like, how many can they be in